County courtroom today, a Dallas man pleads guilty in a statewide fuel stealing scheme. Dunieski Gonzalez is one of 3 people charged with using a pulsar device to steal diesel fuel. The device essentially tricks the pump into thinking it's pumping less fuel than it actually is. Gonzalez tried to plead guilty at the start of trial today, but Judge Taylor Heaton refused that plea, concerned about the man's understanding of the situation.
I'm not guilty, but I want you to get it over.
Oh, that's fine. Okay. All right.
Look, I can't, the court is not going to be able to find that he has made a freely and intelligent decision to plead guilty. The court's not going to accept his plea of guilt.
Now, after almost a full day of the bench trial, Gonzalez pleaded guilty again, and the judge accepted that plea after Gonzalez said that he was nervous earlier in the day. He also took back comments that he was unhappy with his attorney. His sentence, which could range from 5 to 99 years, will be decided June 18th. New tonight at 6.